Right, thank you very much, Andy. Right, so I won't talk too much about myself because Andy gave a great introduction there. So what I'm going to go straight into is absolutely nothing to do with testing or anything like that. I want to spend a bit of time talking to you about my obsessive fandom with Derren Brown. Is anyone else a Derren Brown fan here? Without wanting to feel like I'm selling for him, he's actually in town right now. He's doing 4 nights at the Mayflower from tonight. I'm going tomorrow. And I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm very happy that I can draw upon Derren for this. I don't know if you saw one of his more recent shows. Does anyone remember The System? The System was all about horse racing. Does that jog a few more memories? So what The System was about was that Derren claimed that he had developed a system for predicting the winner of a horse race with 100% accuracy. In fact, he guaranteed it so much that he guaranteed it to a young woman called Kadisha, who was a willing participant in this experiment. So Kadisha was contacted by email by an anonymous tipster, who was Derren, claiming to have developed a guaranteed system for winning at the races. So Kadisha was told to look out for the result of a particular race, and of course, she kept an eye on the result, and it won. Fantastic. Then she was contacted a second time and told who would win a second race. But this time she was asked to put some money on it. So she did. She put about £100 on it. And as you would expect, the horse won. So this was pretty good. The system apparently worked. So then she was contacted again, and she won again for a third and a fourth time. The system was perfect. After the fourth race, Derren then revealed himself to be the person behind the system. And then he asked her to make one last bet, to put all of her winnings, everything that she had, on one final bet. And she didn't have a lot of money, so she managed to get together about £4,000, which for her was a significant sum to put on a horse, let alone potentially lose it. But she did it. And after that bet was placed, he told her how the system worked. And it worked like this. So, this was how it worked from Kadisha's perspective. The first race, she won. The second race, she won. The third race, she won. The fourth race, she won. Everything that she was looking at told her that the system was perfect and that she would win every single time. But Kadisha was not the only person who was part of the system. This isn't working, sorry. Kadisha was one of 7,776 people who were split into 6 equal groups of 1,296 people. All of those people were contacted by email and told that they would be, or rather they were told the name of one of 6 horses. And of course, only one of those horses won. So 5 out of 6 people were contacted and said, sorry, it looks like the system didn't work. Whoops, never mind. But those 1,296 people were then taken to the next round and split into 6 groups of 216 people. And this carried on for 4 more races until in the end they had 6 people against 6 horses. And Kadisha happened to be the person who won each time. So, there she is. She's put £4,000 on a horse because she believes in the system, and it's absolute bollocks. Derren explained to us how this system worked to make one stunningly dramatic but fun point, is that we all carry something called a confirmation bias. And that is the tendency to look for signs that reaffirm things that we already believe. We look for confirmation of that belief, and we ignore anything that falsifies that. Because Kadisha believed in the system, everything told her that this was working, and there was no reason for her to test whether that wasn't true. So there are loads of biases that we carry. confirmation bias being the most predominant one in this example. We see these sort of biases every day. And this is because we're pattern matching animals. So we do seek that familiarity and that stuff that reaffirms what we already believe. We'll see that in national newspapers where they play on prejudice and they will pick up on things that they want to carry through for their own narrative. We're seeing conspiracy theories where people will believe that a potential conspiracy exists, and then whenever there's something that will reaffirm that belief, the conspiracy theory is further given evidence. And then there's things like the placebo effect, where you might be ill and you might take some medication, and then you start to feel better, and you attribute that feeling better to that piece of medication, even if in fact what you were given was a complete placebo and it does nothing to you. This means that you're feeling the effects of regressing to the mean, which if you've ever read Bad Science by Ben Goldacre, he describes that being the reality of what happens to you whilst you're the recipient of this placebo effect. So confirmation bias shows us just how limiting our own perspective can be, or the perspective of other people that we might be working with. And this can have potentially a detrimental effect on our business or our decisions that we're making, based on the data that we're allowing ourselves to be influenced by because we believe that it's already true. So some of these other biases that you might recognize in yourself, ambiguity effect, the belief in something that you already know about against something that you don't know about, particularly with a favorable result. So let's say, for instance, mortgage or mortgage application. People, there may be people who work at banks or lending companies who will disagree with me, maybe, but as I believe, the effects of picking a mortgage with a fixed rate are significantly higher, or certainly significantly favoured over picking variable rate mortgages, because you know exactly what you're going to get, as opposed to picking something where you don't know what that effect is, or whether it's a favourable result in your favour. Selective perception, the tendency to expect certain expectations from people, from scenarios. So for instance, if we took a teacher, they might ignore bad things about a favoured student and then also overlook good things of a student that they don't particularly like. Then there is the status quo bias. So that would be where we are just happy with the way that things are and that changing things might be slightly scary, and that we'll stick with that. And then finally, there's the bandwagon effect. And this is something that you'll see in focus groups. Focus groups is quite a popular way of doing user research. But focus groups can be dangerous because you can have someone or a majority of people in that room who can actually change the opinion or what someone says they believe in as part of that focus group. And there are various experiments that you can look up that show the effect of an entire group of people who are set up to influence one person in that group. And despite everything that that person experiences or sees, they will say something that the rest of the group believe or make them believe is true, even though there's no evidence to suggest that. If you disagree with what I'm telling you, that's because you have a bias blind spot, and you believe yourself to be less susceptible to biases than other people. So I'm sorry, but you do have a bias. So if you're not conscious of confirmation bias and you're safe for others, that means that you could be making one of the following mistakes, and that's why it's so important that you are aware of these biases that you take with you. So a good example would be that you're just not testing at all, because you already believe in the performance of your website, you're hearing great things about it, and there's no reason for you to have any doubts over how well that website might be working. Or there might be an element of that website that you already think is good and there's no reason to test it. A really good example of this would be carousels. Like carousels are quite a popular thing on home pages. So as well as having the bias of a bandwagon effect, because a lot of people put carousels on their website because they believe carousels are a good thing, you may well also be susceptible to the confirmation bias, because someone might tell you that a particular picture in your carousel looks good, but that represents no statement whatsoever over how well that carousel works for your website, for your conversion rate, or anything else like that, rather. You are biased by that confirmation that it's a good thing, even though there's no evidence for it whatsoever. And what you're not allowing yourself is the opportunity to find out the truth. Okay, so let's say that you are testing. However, you may not be looking at the problems that actually exist. You may be testing things to just reinforce the things that you already believe. So whilst I was talking about carousels and saying maybe not testing them, maybe, let's say for instance that you have a page and you've got a button that says buy now and you are absolutely confident that's the best color button and the best type of text. There's no reason for you to think otherwise. So you think potentially the problem or the area for improvement on that page might be an image. Let's say you want to put an image on that page to put a person into that page because usability tests suggest that having a person in that image will improve your conversion rate. So because you have absolute confidence in your buy now button, you don't test it, and you have no reason to do that. So anything else that you do to test that page only reinforces your belief that that button is already good. So I just want to dispel a couple of myths or clarify a couple of things before I go any more into what it means to test websites. Firstly, at a very basic level, we might suggest that our website is a potential replacement for a person who might otherwise converse with your customer. So rather than someone phoning up your company and having a conversation with an employee about your business or your product offering, they might be browsing on your website instead. Now, of course, that person who's on the phone, they're able to improve in their job. A question comes in, and then next time they know how to answer that question better. They are becoming better in their role. But your website, which is now making up for that individual, let's say, and someone is now browsing that website directly, if that website isn't learning in its role as well, then you've just basically got an employee there who's not really developing in their role. And you wouldn't want that in a real-world situation, so why should your website become anything close to that? At the end of the day, every design that you create is just a hypothesis. It's just a suggestion over how you think it's going to work right now or best support your business. And that there is no final answer. It's just the one that you have right now. And that it's your job to test that hypothesis, remove any biases that you might be carrying, and be absolutely sure that what you've got there is the best way that it could possibly work. And so when Trenton did the great talk just before lunch about all that research that you put into that process, it absolutely always research and always have the best possible hypothesis that you've got. However, once that website goes live, this is just the start of the project. It is not the build is not the end of that. That testing has to continue because you've just still got that one hypothesis or a collection of several hypotheses. So I'm just going to go through the process of what testing a website might look like. So we've got our build, we're all quite familiar with that. We've come to the conclusion that this is the design or these are the feature sets that we want to have. But now what we do is we need to measure whether that works particularly well. And then once we've measured it, we need to have a look at that data and learn from those measurements. And then feed that straight back into the build. And this is a cycle that will continue, constantly refining your solution, learning from the data that you're collecting through that process, putting them back into the site and making it better, to whatever degree that might be, having already created a hypothesis for how something should work. Now, we test all sorts of things in life. I've tested this talk. I didn't just create it and then hoped that I could just stand here today and talk about it. I would put it in front of people and they would give me some feedback. I was able to measure my talk. If you've been to Laura's data visualization workshop, you'll know that she's doing some work on testing how people feel through Twitter and things like that, the emotional response or any comments that they make online to measure how good or bad something might be. So today, or this talk might be being measured right now over various metrics. And then what we do is we'll learn from that, we'll refine that, and we'll build that back into maybe the next time that I do it, or the next time that we hold an event. And that's just a real life example. Okay, another real life example might be, okay, so I'm getting married next week, and being the statistician that I am through this process, I'm 95% confident that the girl I picked to marry is definitely going to be the right one. But of course, I didn't just pick the first girl I found, I had to go through several girls first before deciding this was definitely the right one. So, but my point being is, of course, I didn't just pick the first one, and so forth. So before we can do any kind of measurement, we have to have an understanding of our baseline of how stuff is performing. And now there will be people here who are perfectly familiar with some of these tools, but I'll just run through them here, just to ensure that we all have a sound footing before we start any kind of testing process. Because if we don't know how things are performing right now, there's nothing to test against. So some of these tools, for instance, might be Google Analytics. I'm sure the majority of you, if not everybody here, has already used Google Analytics to some degree. But that will tell you about the performance of aspects of your website right now, whether that's page views or whatever, or certain goals. And then there are other tools out there like Hotjar that can give you different metrics for different aspects of your website, or just different ways of measuring it. Tools I particularly like are tools like Inspectlet that just focus on form analytics. So they'll give me some more information about how people are using forms on my website that allow me to have a baseline understanding of the performance of that form. So with Google Analytics, for instance, really, really quick, I'm sure the majority of you are perfectly familiar with this already, but this would be a funnel that I can see on Google Analytics. And as people journey through that funnel, they'll either drop out of that funnel or they'll carry on to the next stage. And I will be able to quickly identify that there's a potential problem area here and come up with a hypothesis for why that might be. And I have some baseline data in which to test that hypothesis against. Hotjar, very similar concept, except that they visualize it in a slightly different way, and they have some nice big red areas like analytics to suggest that you might want to focus on this part of your funnel because it apparently sees a lot of people drop out at this stage. And then Inspectlet, as I was talking about there, two examples here. The one on the left represents the amount of hesitation time that people might be carrying out whilst filling in that form. So for instance, I think it's the address field there, you'll notice that that field has a particularly high amount of hesitation on time on it. And it's from that we might be able to build a hypothesis. So why are people hesitating to complete this field? Is it actually necessary to ask for this field? Is that why they're hesitating on actually completing it? Or do users actually understand what that field is for? Maybe it's just poorly explained. And then with the average fill rate on the right-hand side, this poses questions like why are people changing their subscription plan? You'll notice that what this represents here is that for every one time that form is filled in, users are changing their answer at least more than 2 times. So they're filling it in and then they're changing it again. So you have to ask, well, why is that happening? Is it because the price isn't particularly clear? Is it because people don't know what's involved in that subscription plan? Those sorts of things. And that gives you an opportunity to have a hypothesis to say, okay, our subscription plans aren't very clear because they don't do this. Or maybe the subscription plans are poorly priced. I don't know. It could be several different scenarios. But you'll come up with a hypothesis and then develop the test to test that. So, how do we test our hypotheses? You may be familiar with A/B testing or multivariate testing. I'll just give a very quick overview for those people who haven't done it before. So basically what you do is you take your website and you make a change to it and you put that side by side. There's 2 variances that I've got there. So on this particular web page you'll see that one of the calls to action in the middle, one's a blue button, one's a red button. And I have a hypothesis, whatever the scenario might be, that changing the colour of that button is going to improve the conversions that come through that part of the website. Now what I do with A/B testing is I will split that traffic evenly. 50% of people will see one side, 50% of people will see the other side, and then I will allow that test to run and run until I hit statistical significance and know with a certain degree of accuracy, however I've decided to determine that, whether it's 90 or 95%, that variance is better than the other one, and then I will build that straight back into my solution and carry on to the next one. And of course I can run multiple tests at a time. In fact, with multivariate testing, what I can do is I can combine my tests. So I might say that I don't just want to change the button color, I want to change the text on the button as well and see the effect of that and work out which combination of text and button color is the best one for me. But that's ultimately what A/B testing is. And you've been part of a test today. You may well have guessed where this test may well have been. It's been part of this. So there have been 3 tests running on this, 3 multivariate tests running. I can very briefly take you through them. So we had some hypotheses about what would create the best performing aspects of this page. The one on the left demonstrates the propensity for people to tweet about that particular talk. The hypothesis is that including an image inside that will heighten your chances of engaging with that feature. Another one is testing the colour of the tweet button on the left-hand side there, the one that says tweet now, whether this should contrast against the one that says download or not. And then those combinations are running to see which combination of image or no image and then button colour affects the propensity for people to tweet. And if I get some time at the end, I will show you the results that we currently have for that. The second one is about the way that we speak to you through that request for a report. So apologies if I'm now showing you how we are attempting to manipulate you, but I promise this is not an attempt to sell at you. It's just an appropriate example. So the title on the top there says benchmark your company. This is an opportunity for us to use personalization. Some of you would have seen it say benchmark your company. Some of you would have seen it name your company. A bit more of an association there. Now I appreciate some of these are quite basic examples, but you can see how this can grow and extrapolate to different scenarios. The second part of that is again just changing the color of that call to action to see if it stands out better in another color. Now I may well believe that it would definitely work better if it stands out in a different color. In a brighter blue, for instance. However, some of my assumptions are already proving, just on the basis of this morning, that they were wrong. That doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm talking about. It just means that I accept the fact that my bias is not an acceptable way of encouraging you to run your websites a certain way. I need data as much as you do. Okay, and the third one, that one is, again, changing the color of the download buttons that are there, but also the top part is more about the action that I'm asking you to take part in. So you'll see it says earlier today there, it's a very passive title, doesn't really do much. Some of you would have seen that title say download slides or something like that, something a little bit more forceful. I say forceful. Usability testing suggests that if you tell the user what to do, they're more likely to do it. It seems pretty common sense, but these are the sort of things that we might not even really think about, whether we're creating titles for our page, whether we're creating copy, the effects of getting that terminology correct, or even assuming that our terminology in the first instance was correct. So there are some great tools that allow you to go out and start doing this today. These are them listed there. You can do varying degrees, and the ease at which it is to run some of those tests differ between some of these tools. So we use things like VWO and Optimizely at Adido, and that allows us to very easily run multiple tests all the time over multiple websites. But you could also do it inside Google Analytics. It's a far more simpler and also a slightly more, requires more of you from a technical point of view in order to create A pages and B pages that it will then serve, as opposed to having one version that it will just change itself. But rather than getting into the detail, I would encourage you to take a look at some of these tools and recognize there's an opportunity there for you to just validate some of your assumptions on your website, and then maybe how you can roll that out further into finding some real, genuine insight into what you believed worked. So just to give a bit of anatomy into the running of an A/B test. So we've got the build at the beginning, and that build will vary in length from whether I'm creating a new project or whether I'm just making a previous change from a previous iteration. But the build happens, and then we have a period of measurement. Now that period of measurement will vary dependent on the amount of traffic that you're throwing at your variances, the number of variances that you have, because that will affect how many people go to each variance, and then also the statistical significance you're looking for, how high a probability you want to guarantee that the variance that wins is the best one. And as I say, depending on traffic, this could range from running for a couple of days, a week, to maybe 3 months. But there's a problem in that, and much that A/B testing is a great tool, and I'm not putting it down at all. That means, let's take 3 months as an extreme example. That means that you have a number of variances that are being served to users for quite a while that are not your best performing option. And let's say that we have 4 variances, or whatever that scenario is. That means 75% of your traffic, because all that traffic is being distributed equally, is being distributed to a variance that ultimately doesn't work as well as the best one. Not ideal, as you can imagine, because that means that 75% of your people are therefore not converting as high as they could do, were they being exploited, with the variance that is actually the best one, which we haven't yet discovered. So what we need to do is we need to do a couple of things to try and find a way for A/B testing to work a little bit better for us to ensure that we are not susceptible to those issues. So we need to reduce that time and risk. We want to reduce the time it takes to deliver the best performing variant to the majority of the traffic, rather than letting the minority experience it for a while. And we also want to reduce the risk of those lost conversions because users weren't being served that better variant. So in order to achieve this, we ultimately need to fail fast. We need to work out what doesn't work quicker and ditch it. So to understand quickly which variant is probably the best and serve it as soon as possible. And then this is where issues with statistical significance come in, but hopefully I will convince you that that might not actually matter. So the problem that we need to do is we need to reduce that process down. So rather than having those three processes of build, measure, and learn, we want to merge measure and learn together so that measure and learn are one in the same thing. As soon as we learn, or rather, as soon as we've measured something and we've learned about it, we should then be able to adapt straight away rather than waiting for that measurement to happen and then learn from it at the end. So these are the types of things that we're trying to explore more at Adido, is mitigating that risk, taking away that concern, those biases that we all carry again about the status quo or not knowing what the alternative option is and not really wanting to test it because we don't know that the test won't throw up a bad result. But of course, knowing that you're throwing up a bad result for an existing variant is better to know than not to know it at all. So this machine learning we can take from alternative algorithms and scenarios that might allow us to work out the best way of doing this. Okay, so you've all been tweeting this morning, and we've secretly been running a competition that says the person who tweeted the most is going to win a prize. This isn't true, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that winner is Matt, because you're there in my eye line. Congratulations, you've tweeted the most, you've won a prize. Adido have paid for you for an all expenses, no, that's an exaggeration, a trip, a one-night trip to Las Vegas. Congratulations, okay? A couple of things there. So, a couple of caveats. You're only there for one night, I'm sorry. You don't have very long there, but I'm sure you'll have fun. I am giving you some spending money, but it's only 50 quid. Are you all right with the gambling thing? That's, yeah, looking forward to it already. Okay, fantastic. So the problem that you have, because you don't have a lot of money and you don't have a lot of time, is that you need to maximize the sum of your rewards for the amount of time that you have in the slots. And this is why it's called the multi-armed bandit problem. So a one-armed bandit, if you don't already know, is a slot machine in the USA. And it's called a one-armed bandit because it's got one lever on it and steals all your money. And so let's say that we now have our one night in Vegas and we've got a bit of money and we've now got a row of one-armed bandits. And it's Matt's job to maximize the sum of his rewards that he gets from that bandit in the least amount of lever pools available to him. So before we jump into how we can use this for our testing, or our A/B testing, I just want to describe a little bit more about the problem that we're going through. So let's say that the way that we're going to solve this, based on what I was describing before, is that we're always going to try the variant that has the highest average reward based on what we know about that variant already. So in this case, we will always display that variant. Irrespective of anything else we know, the best performing one is going to be the one that we're going to serve. So how does this work in practice? So here are my three variants, or my three one-armed bandits. I'm just going to condense it down to three for the sake of argument. But it could be many, 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 many. So I happen to know between you and me that one of my variances is the best one, but we're just going to test this, and two of those are not very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to run an algorithm that for each user that comes to my website, I'm going to serve them the one that I know is working the best right now, so that the chances of that conversion are higher because what they're potentially seeing is potentially the best one, and I have evidence to support that. So the first user comes into the site, and what we're going to do, sorry, I should have clarified this, is because we don't know anything about these slot machines at the moment, or these variances, we're going to assume they all pay out every single time. We have to assume that they are fantastic and they're perfect, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the first one, and a user comes to my site, and they don't convert, or I don't get a reward from that one-armed bandit. So my conversion rate has immediately dropped from 100% to 0%. One view, no reward. So I move on to the next one. That one's out because I have two others that perform better. So I do the same to this one. Now, even though this is a bad variant, that one view returns a conversion or returns a reward. Fantastic. So I'm going to try it again because I know this one is good. I do that, but this time it doesn't convert because ultimately it's bad. and now I'm down to 50%, 2 views, 1 return. But I've now still got that other variant, which in theory is paying out at 100%. Traffic comes through, and then for whatever reason, because there are multiple variables about why this might happen, that user does not convert, and it's now at 0. And I am stuck now. My rule about always showing the best possible variant has bit me a bit, because no matter what happens now, no matter how many times people view that page, that percentage will always be more than 0. So what we have to do is we have to ignore the, well, not ignore, we have to alleviate that exploitation slightly and allow ourselves to explore more ideas, to test more ideas. Because we didn't give ourselves the opportunity to get back to the good variant and see if that had the potential to work better than the other two, which we know it did. So what we do is we have to use an e-greedy algorithm to only exploit 90% of the time, and then every 1 in 10 user, we're just going to give them a random variant, and we're going to give it the opportunity to be the best one again. So as you can imagine, what's happening was each person that's visiting my site, I'm giving them the best variant that I have 90% of the time, but I could still be wrong because I don't have statistical significance. I don't know with absolute certainty or confidence that this is the best one, but based on what I know right now, because it's a myopic algorithm, so it's only thinking about the short term, then I know that this is the one I'm going to serve for the moment until I know otherwise. Right, so we've got a little bit further down the road now. And what we do now is our good variant is at a 50% conversion rate at the moment. That's good. A couple of bad variants there still of varying conversion rates. So 90% of the time I'm always serving up this one. A user comes in, but they don't convert. So that immediately drops down to 40%, and I've now moved over to my bad variant that's at 45% because I'm always showing the best one. Okay? Now someone comes to this one and they don't convert. That drops down to 41.6%. which still makes it the best variant in theory. However, I'm allowing 10% of my traffic through to a different variant to give it the opportunity to outperform the one that we thought was the best. Of course, the person converts that time, and now we're jumping up to 60%. And now, because 90% of the time we're exploiting, we are showing that one more often. So what we're doing is we're making up for the fact that rather than evenly distributing people across multiple variances, of which 66% are not the ones that we're going to end up wanting to use, we are now heightening the chances of people using a variant that will perform better and allowing ourselves to be wrong and to adapt during that process. And if we build that in to the algorithm so that every test ultimately changes which variance is being shown, then we're not having to show them all. And then that graph that I showed you before, in terms of time and value coming across from my product, you will see that the opportunity to actually gain value from your product as the machine learns going through each variance heightens and increases, and then your opportunity to grab those what were going to be lost conversions, you get them far earlier, and then the performance of your website is therefore increased. So what we're doing is we are failing fast and we're adapting, we are measuring and we are learning, and we're doing that all at once. So there are some arguments for and against these two algorithms. Ultimately, if you are doing A/B testing, as I've already said, you are increasing your chances of getting lost conversions. However, if you're doing the multi-armed BANDIT or the MAD algorithm, then what you're doing is you are increasing the amount of time before you get to statistical significance. However, I expect you would all agree with me that the bottom line is more important than knowing actually which variant is the best. So, in summary, those biases we have to try and dispel, try and get away from, take away the things that we thought we already knew about our site, or the things that the highest paid person in the room thinks is the right decision, to find the data, to disprove or prove what we believe, and then take that into our design process. You need to ask yourself whether you're testing enough, because every design is a hypothesis, it is not finished, and that the end of the build is just the start of the project. Make sure you are establishing some success metrics so you know what you're trying to improve and what success looks like, and that you're using the correct goals in order to deliver upon, the correct tools in order to deliver upon those goals. Learn quickly, fail fast, and make sure that you explore more. And that's me. If you've got any questions, thank you very much.